Welcome. I am delighted to be here today with a friend and colleague, Eric Klein, to talk about spiritual bypassing. Such an important topic in our world today. And Eric comes from a background of many years of being a spiritual teacher and practitioner of Kriya Yoga and meditation. So let's get started.
As I understand it, the gentleman who kind of coined the term, I think his name was John Wellwood. He was a psychologist from Northern California. And it was basically something he observed in his clients who were on a spiritual path, that there was a tendency to use spiritual ideas or spiritual practices as a way to, well, he used the term bypass, try to go around or avoid um, difficult emotions and challenging relationship dynamics, and in a certain way, the nitty gritty of their human life. What is your sense of it?
Yeah, that's definitely what I see, both what I hear online and what I see, among people that I know and also with clients. And what I've been really thinking about a lot lately, and I'm really curious to have more conversation about, is like I feel sure people don't do it on purpose.
Mm.
So I've had some really big curiosity around how it comes to be
Oh yeah, that's
as,
good.
yeah,
I like the we don't do it on purpose. It's a tricky idea, isn't it? It's, you know,
yeah,
once we learn how to do something, anything,
yeah.
turn on the light switch, brush our teeth, how we tie our shoes. Tying shoes is a good example, I think. At some point, we don't do it, quote, on purpose because it's just like innately wired into our nervous system.
Right.
Shoes are on, tying is happening. We can carry on a conversation and the shoes
Yeah.
get tied. So
Yeah.
we're not doing it in that sense on purpose, but we had to do it on purpose in the beginning to wire it in. It had to be something that
Yeah.
happened with a certain degree of purposefulness, let's say. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say, and I'm curious about your perspective on this, I would say that there's always purpose, and sometimes we're not consciously aware of it.
Oh, yeah. That's a good point.
So if it's a survival
That's the
piece,
purpose. Yeah.
then there is a purpose, and it serves a very good purpose of survival, and we aren't always consciously aware of it, and we aren't always consciously aware of whether it's serving us
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Anymore, right? Like,
anymore. Yeah.
I mean, I can think in my family of origin, there was a lot of, it was not a safe environment in this to bring up um, conversations about emotional realities.
Mm.
I'm not sure. Well, I know no one ever said that. Like, we didn't have a little plaque in the kitchen. Here's the rules of the converse. It was simply the emotional weather that I was moving through as a child.
Mm.
And so survival means fitting in with your family in a certain way.
Yeah.
So I absorbed that, capacity to bypass at least the well, it starts as bypassing the conversation, but it starts before that because it's bypassing the conversation I'm even having with my own experience. So I definitely
Yes.
learned that in that environment, but it wasn't like a consciously delivered lesson. It was just implicit in the ways
Yeah.
that we all interacted and my parents modeled and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really love the words you use to describe that, the emotional weather kind of in your family environment, because that's exactly what it is. And kids pick up really quickly. I often say we come into the world fully being able to feel,
Mm,
all of our emotions and everything, and then we very quickly learn what needs to get shut down or repressed or held in check to be able
Yes.
to fit in. And we pick it up through, the vibes. I often say, in the same way that if you walk into a room and there's a couple that you know there and they've just had an argument, like you can feel that, right? So there's same way that we can feel as children, whether it's
Yeah.
okay to be angry, or
Yeah.
express our sadness.
That's a good, those are both classics, right? Kind of
Yeah.
on either end of the continuum. The heat and the fire and the intensity of the anger, that's not acceptable, perhaps. And then on the other end, the sort of sinking, wet, heavy feeling of
Mm,
the sadness, that's not acceptable. So
yeah.
it's still there. I think that's what we're saying. But
Yeah.
the bypassing part of it then so there's a sort of an unconscious, maybe survival bypassing that was needed in our early environments.
Yeah.
And then I can speak from my personal experience and from working with students. We can adopt spiritual perspectives and even spiritual practices to, for example, if the heat of anger is not okay, then I want to be heart-centered at all
Mm,
times. But that heart-centeredness becomes a sort of uh, protective bubble that keeps out the energy
yeah.
and the intelligence that's potentially in the anger space. Because I've
Yes.
learned to do, now I'm doing it as an adult, and I'm just going to be heart-centered.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. Um, I love that example. And I think anger is a perfect example because I think it's one that the majority of people struggle with
Yeah.
because we've been, so uncomfortable with it. Either we couldn't express it as kids, or, our parents held it in and held it in and held it in and then lost it. So it felt scary.
Yeah, yeah. And
So
we
we're
don't.
either scared of it or we repress it or both.
Mm. And how does that then show up in the ways that people uh, parent and relate to their children?
So I think in families, I mean, I see a few different scenarios, and I'm sure there's even more, but I see sometimes parents really doing a similar pattern to maybe what their parent did. So really,
Mhm.
they want to parent their kids differently. And this is where it just feels important to say one more time, like, people don't do this on purpose. It is wired into the nervous system, and it can be changed, and it does take some work, and usually the support of somebody else. So um, parents don't want to wound their children, especially if they recognize that they have wounding. And so that's where I see parents coming in and they want to do, peaceful parenting or gentle parenting or,
Mm.
attachment. These things really appeal to them. Um, and it's an honorable path to be taking, to be trying to change these patterns. And when that unprocessed anger is still in their system, they often will tend to try to parent differently by holding it down, holding it down, holding it down, being patient, being patient, being patient. But eventually, much like a balloon can only hold so much air,
Mm.
when their capacity is reached, it bubbles up, right? And then they lose their patience, and then they feel, the shame and so I see that pattern going around. Sometimes parents are able to maintain it for the most part and don't really blow up very often, but what they see in their kids is anger,
Yes.
and they're struggling to deal with the anger. So that's the flip side of it. They're patient, patient, patient. And sometimes these parents, and I can share some experience with this because I had some of this. When you have a lot of what in the somatic world we call functional freeze in your
Functional
system.
freeze.
Functional freeze,
Okay.
meaning you've got some locked-in freeze response from multiple experiences in your younger years
Mm-hmm.
of being in a freeze response and not having any help to come back into regulation.
Mm-hmm.
So that freeze stays there, but on the surface, you're functioning.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
So we
That's
call it
good.
functional freeze.
Let's pause. I wanted to, as you were talking about, right before you got to the part about how the the anger energy, the heat energy might be expressed in the kid, might
In the
be
children.
manifesting it, right? I I was flat right before you said it, I was flashing back many, many, many decades. Um,
Mhm.
gosh, 40 years or more, when Davey and I were visiting a spiritual community that friends of ours lived at, a Sufi community, and
Mm.
which was all very oriented towards peace and in an authentic way. That was their desired, their aspiration was to be an embodiment of peace. And part of the way that they worked that in the community was there was no like GI Joes, if that was the right way to say it, toys that were militarily,
Right.
guns and stuff like that. But as our friend Elizabeth said, kids can make guns out of anything. We live in a
Yeah,
forest. They're making guns out of
they do.
the woods, the trees, the
Yeah.
twigs. So that expression, you know, like they had to confront this as a community, which was that
Mm.
there's an energy of life
Hmm.
that and what we can call it aggression, we could call it agency. A little more neutral, we could just call it the fire of passion is then if it's not it's yes it's unhealthy when it's expressed as war, but the kids still need to bring it out, right? And they were bringing it out
100%.
with picking up logs and going boom 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 like
Yeah.
that. And at first the response of the parents was kind of horror and uncertainty and maybe even like what are we doing wrong, and gradually they realized with humor and love that it's fine. They're going to express this. And
Yeah.
the more maybe it's what you're pointing to, the more we push it down, the more it seems problematic, you know?
100%. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And yeah, and I think that to I have a couple points that I want to make. One is that to just make a point about the functional freeze. I think if you have a lot of functional freeze in your system as an adult, um, you often can't feel some of your own feelings, and
Mm,
often anger is one of those.
mhm,
So when your child's anger bubbles up, you can't
mhm.
meet it with that same resonance and
Yeah.
support it and hold it.
Mhm.
So even if you feel like you're letting your child express it because they're having a tantrum, that's different than actually being able to meet it and hold it because you're connected to your own vitality energy is often what I call it, but I hear you. Fire,
Yeah.
passion, they're all the same. It's our basic life force energy that we need, and it
Yeah.
helps us set boundaries and say no,
Yes.
and to know who we are and to
That's a
know the
really
path we
good.
want to follow.
Yes. Oh, that's a really important. It's so important at this time in history when it's
Mm.
really um, when we have when we have profoundly destructive technologies, not twigs, in the hands of
Yeah,
people, adults who have not metabolized and met that anger and that vitality energy in a way that's
hmm,
nourishing. Well, everybody can just check the headlines. It's disaster,
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah,
spreads. And and one of the things so that's sort of the global way of looking at it. And then we bring it back in. Even you brought it even in more fundamentally to our capacity to meet that vitality within our own experience,
Mhm.
somatic experience, within our
Yeah.
own embodied experience, to meet that vitality um, directly and to create a relationship with it directly becomes the
Mhm.
foundation for the way we relate to others who are working through their own anger or vitality issues.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, how do you support people in making that inner turn?
Yeah. So really, in somatic therapy and in particular relational somatic therapy, the teachings that I've been learning, the teacher that I've been learning from has really integrated a lot of the attachment theory
Mm-hmm.
and work of people like Diane Poole Heller and Alan Shore to the somatic experiencing, because it's not only having somebody, there's two pieces. It's having somebody present with you who can hold a container as you and maybe guide you to come back into your body and to notice what's going on there so that you can, I guess, befriend again
Mm-hmm.
sensations and body experiences that you may have disconnected from for survival reasons, like we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other piece of it is the relational piece of it is really having someone there, um, your therapist, or, in your situation, it might be you as a facilitator or leader of a
Mm-hmm.
group setting, that can really um, create a container and sort of some feedback that lets people know that it's safe to have that experience,
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. That's good.
right? So
Yeah.
the relational piece is important as well because the wounding happened in relationship, typically.
Mm-hmm.
There
Yeah.
wasn't somebody there who could hold a container or who could help you come back into regulation.
Yeah.
And so updating the memory imprint or rewiring the nervous system, whatever you want to call it, is really supported by being in relationship as you update the imprint with someone whose acceptance you can feel.
Hmm.
Does
But
that make sense?
yes, it does. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of levels in there.
Yeah.
And the one I just want to start with is updating the imprint. That's an important, and that's a good one to contrast with spiritual bypassing, because in bypassing, what we do is we don't update the imprint. What we do is we overlay on the imprint a,
Right.
a spiritual concept or a spiritual ideal, and
Yeah.
we strive to live that. But the imprint itself uh, hasn't been updated, and it doesn't get updated, as you're pointing out. It doesn't get updated cognitively. It gets updated through being met and through being experienced and through being infused, is the way we would say it, infused with love,
Uh,
with loving awareness, which is an intimacy that happens at the deep levels of the nervous system.
mm,
And then the updating. It's sort of like, to me, it's like it's a maturing and it's an organic process. It's not like imposing an idea of
yes.
updating, right?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
it's by being in contact with loving awareness to those parts, they they're just given the permission on the one hand and the presence and the energy to grow naturally into their more into the form that they wanted to grow into in the beginning, you know.
Nice. Exactly. And I really love the language you've used there. yeah, arising organically. It does need to arise organically, and given that permission for the organic experience to happen or to
Yeah.
unfold. So that loving presence is really, um, yeah, what's needed. And you said something about infusing, was it infusing loving
Yeah.
awareness? Can you say a little bit more about how that happens in the tradition of work you've been
Yeah, sure.
teaching and practicing?
Yeah. Okay. So in this work, if we took if we took two aspects of support or two aspects of therapeutic work, one that's being modeled and emanated by a teacher or a therapist or a guide, and then this, I don't know, this other dimension of it, which is just like it's all happening inside my own contemplative experience,
Mm,
right? So then, but to get to this contemplative experience, of course, we do need some teaching and some support and some feedback on how to do that kind of inner um, healing work on our own.
mhm.
In yoga and meditation, there absolutely values the teacher and kind of, I would say, prioritizes in a way, cultivating the student's capacity to receive that loving awareness directly from life itself.
Ah, nice.
Yeah. So the teacher is an expression of life, but the
Yeah,
life is, or that the radiance that's doing the actual healing is already there
yes.
in the nervous system and in the soul of the practitioner. So I use the word infuse, which it happens so automatically. It's like when I go outside and stand in the sunlight is infusing my body. But it's not
Mm,
like the sunlight's going like, I am now infusing you, you know.
right.
It's just the
It's not like
nature,
it's trying to get in, it
it's
just
just the nature of it.
happens. Yeah.
Yeah. So contemplative practice, meditation practice, when we turn the light of loving awareness toward those places in ourself, in our soul, our memories, the memory imprint, that is the infusing. Just being with it, being with
Yeah.
it is the infusing.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Being with it is,
Yeah.
yeah. Being with it is the key. And I know that it just sounds like it's what we're doing is so aligned with different language. It's
Yes, it is.
fascinating to me.
It's totally aligned. And part of on this side of the world with the meditation people, the thing is there can be an over prioritization of the uh, sort of the internal experiencing, and the self becomes kind of like this, the self becomes a bubble wherein I'm healing inside. And there needs to be a move out to,
Right.
because we're here, we're we we came into this life. So there's people, and environments and life situations. It's like that's where then the inner healing, the fruition of the healing comes in terms of our relating.
Right.
Now, the other side of it, I don't know, tell me what you think, is that sometimes people get sort of like dependent on the teacher or the workshop or the program,
Yeah.
and it's like they haven't yet cultivated that inner relationship with the radiance that they already are anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that does happen sometimes in therapy. And, again, I can speak to the particular, teachings and training that I've experienced, and my most recent teacher really focused a lot on supporting clients to um, have experiences of that holding and nervous system soothing that arise from different sources, not just the teacher, so
That's
that there's more, flexibility, for lack of a better word. That's not quite the right word, but to there's less reliance on the
Yeah,
therapist because that supports more resilience for the client in the long run. It's
I
not a
like that.
question of the therapist being unwilling. It's
Yeah,
not always in service.
yes. I love that image too, because it's opening up, our receptors to all the blessing energy that's available in
Yeah,
unexpected ways and places and
yeah,
sources, right? So
yeah,
that there's of reminders of that safety and that connectedness that are available. We can't predict where, but we can
yeah,
cultivate that capacity to receive that. I love that image. That,
yeah. And when you've had an experience of it in your body
yeah,
and your nervous system has had an experience of that resonance,
yeah,
you are more likely to tune into it as
yeah,
you're going about your everyday life.
yes,
Yeah.
nice. There's a Tibetan Buddhist expression, short moments of clarity repeated many times is
Mm,
the awakening. So
yeah.
it's like all day long there can be that sense of being held,
Yes.
if that's the need, right? Or the sense
Yeah.
of being seen, that's the
Yeah.
need, right? Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So people begin to cultivate their ability to access it on their own over time. Yeah.
So if people want to get in touch with you and work with their own, I would assume they could be parenting, but they
Hmm.
could also be someone who's looking at reparenting maybe themselves. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Where could they get in touch with you?
Yeah. My website is colleenadrian.com. So it's easy to find my email address. We can pop those in the show notes below. Um, yeah, or my email address is on the website as well, colleen@colleenadrian.com.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and I'd love to know if people are more interested in your
Yeah.
work. Eric, how can people reach you?
They can find myself and my wife Davy at Wisdom Heart, just like it sounds, wisdomheart.com. And
Okay.
check out what's available there.
Yeah.
And we do every Sunday, we have a, open free um, meditation practice, guided with
Oh,
music and stuff, chanting and teaching. Uh, we've been doing pre-pandemic. We've been doing it for 40 years, and now it's all online. Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
Wow. 40 years.
I know. I'm getting, soon I'll be an elder.
Yeah.